governor did not rule out signing a temporary spending plan, a major shift from months before.
Yeah, Rauner's been fighting the good fight, but the Democrats, Michael Madigan, they're old pros at this game, and they're dragging him right up against this deadline again. They want a crazy minimum wage hike. They want to keep funding and overspending money they don't have. They want tax increases. It never seems to end. Michael Lucci is joining us right now from the Illinois Policy Institute. Michael, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. It's great to be on your show.
Well, thanks so much for your time today. I try to cover this as frequently as I can if I think something's new in the discussion. As it stands right now, the legislature left town, I understand, and didn't pass a budget, and the governor's over there doing media interviews like, what's going on? We're in the middle of budget negotiations, and they just left me. What in the world is new with this today?
Well, the legislative session ended May 31st, so that means now the date we're at now, if they want to pass anything, they need a supermajority to pass anything right now. So, yes, the legislature, they picked up, they left town, they didn't pass a budget, same thing they did last year, same thing the year before. And let's be honest, they haven't passed a balanced budget pretty much in this century. So you have to go back at least 15 years to find a balanced budget. So this is just the legislature's habit. They've totally messed up the state's finances. They've overpromised on many, many benefits. They've racked up tons of debt, and they're not able to deal with the consequences of all those bad decisions, so they just sort of clock out. I mean, they just clock out and go home without passing a budget, without cutting spending, without really reforming anything, and that's just the Illinois legislature's idea of doing its job. It's quite pathetic, frankly, but that's where we're at right now as a state, and that's why we actually have to fight to retain that title that you gave us, the great state of Illinois. We're going to have to fight to keep that title because this legislature is doing everything it can to make us the not-so-great state of Illinois.
Occasionally, I refer to you as the People's Republic of Illinois. But
that's probably a more accurate description of where we're at right now, where the government's taking control of many things, the government's taxing the people out of the state, and the government's just generally making a mess out of a state that should be just the most tremendous state in the region. It has so many advantages. It has so many assets, but it has a major disadvantage, which is we have the worst politicians in the Midwest, and it's not even close.
We're talking to Michael Lucci from the Illinois Policy Institute. Just to make sure that I understand here, all of that talk a month or two ago about some sort of a grand bargain, there were a couple of senators working on it, I know, where the governor would have agreed to some tax increases and they would have given him some concessions. That kind of all went out the window if they now have to have a super majority to pass any sort of a budget deal in the next month, right?
That's right. And let's get specific on the grand bargain. What it really was, it wasn't grand, and it certainly wasn't a bargain. It was a massive tax hike wrapped up in fake reform. So what they want to do, and the Senate Democrats were pushing it hard, and they did pass some of the pieces of it. They wanted to raise taxes by a whole lot of money. They wanted Republicans to give them cover by voting for those tax increases. And then they wanted to do like a number of sort of window dressing reforms that really wouldn't change anything substantial, and they wanted the governor to sign that. So that's the Democrats going back to their playbook of raise taxes, try to get Republicans to give you cover on it, and then call it a day and go home and spend a lot of other people's money. That's not what the people of Illinois want. Illinoisans have been polled on this very recently, and an overwhelming majority of Illinoisans want a balanced budget without a tax increase.
I wish Bruce Rauner would be shouting that at the top of his voice. I see him trying to fight for this, but he seems to be drowned out constantly by Madigan and some of these other politicians over there. If he gives in and signs some sort of a stopgap bill just because he's got to do that to keep the schools open by July 1st, what kind of message is he sending? I mean, he's giving in there, right?
Well, if they sign a bill, I think that both sides will look at the school issue and they'll say, if the schools don't open, we all lose. Maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong on that. They have done stopgaps to fund education for the last couple of years. So they've said, we're not really getting our job done, we're not passing a budget, but we're going to make sure the schools stay open. I certainly think that if there was a tax increase involved, that would be bad for the state, that would be bad for the governor, that would be bad for the legislature, and they all shouldn't want to do that, even though that's the conversation they've been having recently.
Okay.
If they just keep the schools open, that might be a little bit different. If they go and raise taxes, that's a pretty strong indication that we're continuing to go in the wrong direction.
Well, for all of you Illinoisans thinking about relocating to Missouri, you drive right on through the city of St. Louis to somewhere in the county, because now the mayor of St. Louis is pushing a $20 million tax hike because she can't pay her police. So I'm just trying to give a little bit of warning to my friends over there in southern Illinois. Keep driving.
Well, you should see this side of the border. $20 million tax increase doesn't sound so bad in some of the parts of Illinois. Now, there shouldn't be a tax increase anywhere, but when you see some of the tax increases that pop up in Illinois, it's really mind-boggling. It makes your eyes pop to see what the politicians over here are doing. And it does speak to the fact that a lot of folks are moving from over here right to over on the Missouri side of the border because they get better opportunities, lower cost of living, and better jobs over there, too.
Right. Well, Michael Lucci, keep us updated on this. When does the House and the Senate come back into session? When's the new session start? Are they out all summer?
There won't be a real session until January of next year, but they're going to come in and they're going to pretend that they're in continuous session, which is what Speaker Madigan said for the last couple of years. He said we're in continuous session. Nothing happens. They go down, they collect their per diem pay, they go back to their home after a couple days. They don't really do anything to fix the state.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. All right, Michael, listen, thanks for your time. Have a great weekend.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Michael Lucci with the Illinois Policy Institute. They keep a good eye on things up there, a lot like the Show Me Institute does on this side of the river. So if you want to find out what's going on with your state budget, that may be a better source than some of the news coverage of it, to be quite honest with you. Not a lot of honesty when it comes to state government over in Illinois these days. Not a lot of honesty. This news just coming out just a short time ago. Apparently, Donald Trump doesn't slow down. Despite the huge announcement yesterday and everything else that's going on, we learned earlier today that they're about to revise the mandates the Obama administration put down to provide mandatory birth control coverage, right? They're going to change that, and now this one rolls down. I'm happy to see this. If you listen to my show for any length of time, you know how upset I was that they normalized relations with Cuba again. I'm as big a fan of Cuban cigars as the next guy, but that's not a good enough reason to look the other way for a government that is run by communists that still is a state sponsor of terrorism. The Obama administration held its nose and changed that designation simply so